Hello, my name is Jay. In 2022, I thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail and I learned a few things. So here are 5 things I wish I did differently on the trail. The number one thing may surprise you. I started January 28th, but I actually wish I started sooner. I was expecting just tons of snow, at least a foot of snow here and there, and just branches hanging covered in thick snow. At most I got maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches, but at no point was there just like a foot of snow everywhere. And I really wanted that experience. I mean, most hikers don't want that, but I really wanted it. I was prepared for it. I had all the gear, I had the waterproof socks, I had enough clothes, I had enough base layers. I mean, I was ready, but unfortunately, all I got was some cold. It got down to about 15 degrees the first night and about there a couple more nights later. But overall, yeah, I wish I started earlier so I could have gotten that snow and experienced a full-on winter. And some of you may think I'm crazy for saying it, but I kind of wanted that challenge and the struggle of hiking in the wintertime, but it just wasn't as cold as I had hoped. Number 2 on my things I wish I did differently is I wish I sat down more at viewpoints instead of just watching and then filming some more and then just moving on, just knowing that I had to get to camp. Because I could have just sat there and enjoyed it more. Maybe spend 15 minutes per view, maybe 30 minutes. And getting to camp 30 minutes later is not a big deal. I don't know why I rushed through it. I always just kept my pack on. There were many days I just had my pack on and I didn't take it off until I got to camp later on that day. I didn't take any breaks. I didn't eat lunch except the snacks in my cargo pockets and my fanny pack. I just didn't. I wish I took more breaks, you know? You hear that all the time, but I feel like I really wish I did. Number 3 on my list is I wish I handled my water supply and consumption better. There were many times I was quite dehydrated and I knew I needed to drink more water. And I knew I needed to consistently drink water. Sometimes I would make a plan to get water here. And I would bring what I thought was enough water. And I would kind of ration it until I got to that point. I should have just kept drinking. If there were any water sources in between, I should just kept drinking it and stop to get more water along the way. I drink a lot of water and it takes me a while to filter it all. And I just felt like if I did that, I would be a little quicker, a few minutes quicker. I could have used up more time and just filtered more water and drank more water instead of rushing through it. I definitely would have been healthier if I did that. And there were a couple of situations where I was quite dehydrated and maybe it wouldn't have happened if I just kept drinking. And if I found a water source, just gotten more water instead of going, oh yeah, I'm gonna get water in 3 more miles, something like that. So I wish I did much better with my hydration overall. Number 4 on my list of things is I wish I was more careful on slippery rocks and roots. Like everybody thinks that, and I'm sure anybody that's tripped on one and fallen thought the same. But there were many times where my left foot would hit something and slip and I would hit the outer rim of my foot. And I don't know if you all knew, but my left foot was in extreme pain for at least the whole second half of the trail. Just the knuckle right there was basically super inflamed and really sensitive. And every time I banged it against a rock, it was just intense pain just shot up my leg. And that happened many times just because I slipped or it wobbled, or there were times where I slipped altogether and just fell completely down. One time I slipped, my left foot gave out on a rock and my left hip just went right on a rock. And I knew I hit hard and it hurt a ton, but I was really thankful that I didn't break my hip or something because it was my full weight plus my pack, everything, just slamming down on one tiny point of bone. It's thick there, sure, but it's just one tiny bone and it could have cracked it. And I was so happy that it was just a gigantic bruise and just hurt a ton for several days. But it did slow me down for several days because I had to really use my trekking poles because I couldn't use that hip that well. And there was even at the very end, the last 120 miles or so, I slipped on a route and I pulled the tendon on my left foot And it just got worse and worse and worse over the next 30 miles. And it was a big inflamed spot and caused me a lot of grief and pain. And I wish I didn't do that, because then I would have had an easier time finishing up the rest of the trail. But yeah, those slippery rocks and roots, they'll get you. Be careful out there. And the last thing I wish I did differently on trail, this may not apply to all of you, but I had my Black Diamond carbon core trekking poles since 2014. Since I started backpacking, I had it. And I've used it all throughout the PCT, Arizona Trail, most of the AT. And I've replaced the tips like 6-7 times. All of it by myself. I just pop out the tip, put a new one on, no problem. I even did it on trail once. There was one outdoor center. I bought tips and I asked them if they had an adjustable wrench, and they're like, here you go. And then I popped them right out there, put the new ones on, and I was off. Ideal situation. But there was one spot, I won't say their name, but I gave them my trekking pole thinking they would pop them off. And they took them, and for some reason they were gone a long time. And then they finally came back and said they could not get the tips off. And I was like, what's going on? So I went to the basement with them to their little workshop, and I was like, oh, what are you guys doing? They used a heat gun and tried to get the tip off. And the tip was mutilated because they were using a wrench and gripping it, which is not the way to do it. And the heat gun actually damaged the carbon fiber pole itself just above the trekking pole tip. So I was like, do you have an adjustable wrench? I just popped them right off right there. I was like, that's how you do it. What's going on? So when I put the new ones on, I realized the part just above the trekking pole tips were a little bulged, and the carbon fiber was twisted and exposed, much bigger than it should be. And when I applied pressure, I saw that the ribbons, the carbon fiber itself actually twisted every time I pushed. And I knew with how hard I used my trekking poles that within the next mile, that thing would crack right off. That wouldn't last. Fortunately, they admitted their fault, and they gave me a new set of trekking poles that they had, which is an aluminum pole. It was okay. There were a few issues I had with it, but it wasn't really, their fault. The trekking pole itself, for some reason the tightening screws were not stainless, so over the rest of the hike they actually rusted, which is weird for an outdoor gear. But if I had taken it off myself, I could have just bought the new tip. It would have been no problem. I would have had the same trekking poles. And it's not a super big deal, except I've had those trekking poles for years, and they had sentimental value. Not to mention they work perfectly. The tightening, everything worked fine. None of the screws are rusting. They were perfectly good trekking poles, but they were gone because they had to use a heat gun on it. Such a shame. But anyway, that's a quick rundown of the 5 things I wish I did differently on this through hike. And if I did everything I did, I would have been much happier at the end, I think. So maybe this will help someone. Hopefully it does. But I'd say definitely stop at the viewpoints. That's a big one. Take your time. Take your time. You can get to camp 30 minutes later, and it's not a big deal. Not a big deal. Unless it's going to pour down, and the 30-minute window is pretty narrow, so you might not even make that. So spend some time out there. All right. Thanks for watching. You all take care. You have a good day. Bye. Now I'm going to show some videos you guys can watch now. One up there, one over here. Yeah, maybe a subscribe face over here. Yeah, that's a good one. You should watch that one. Definitely, you should watch that one. Yeah. Oh yeah, that one too. You can watch that one too. Yeah. Which one to watch?